and you're coming along merrily as we go through about, depending on when you're listening or watching this, the middle of April. Hopefully, you got through tax day without too much trouble. Hopefully, you got through tax day some time ago and you were not one of those people sitting in line waiting to get to the post office at midnight, on the 15th. But, it happens. Anyway, I've got a quote today that many people aren't going to like. Now, I will tell you ahead of time, for some of you who are going to be upset with me for a variety of reasons, that this did come from a minister. The man's name is Charles Swindoll, and you can go check him online if you want to and follow through to make sure that I'm saying what I'm saying. But basically, your life is in your hands, and I would agree with that from the standpoint. So let me give you your quote first. Life is 10% what happens to you, and 90% of how you react to it. And again, Charles Swindoll. Life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you react to it. So yeah, things happen to us. Mentioned, a couple of weeks ago, I ended up having to get some new tires, and I've also found out that one of the circuit breakers in my circuit box is sort of needs to be repaired, but that's a totally different story. But so it seems like things happen to us, and a lot of us want to say that what happens is out there. It's those things, those people. If they would do what I wanted them to do, if my children would behave, if my parents would be, if this, that, or the other, if my boss would do this, yeah, maybe, perhaps. The thing about it is you can't control anybody else. You can't control anything else either. I can't. Well, maybe in a sense, I guess I could control the tires in my car if I'd paid attention to them or did something earlier. But in a sense, I can't necessarily control the rate at which they wear. I mean, I can't. Yeah, I can do things to make it go better or worse, but that's the whole thing. I can have some control over what happens by what I do to those things. I can't necessarily control, as far as I can tell anyway, the circuit breaker until I get told from the electrician what's going on. Maybe there was something I could do. Who knows? I don't know. But things are going to happen. You can't control what anybody else does. As much as you would like to say, my life would be better if my spouse would do, my life would be better if my children would listen to me and follow what I tell them to do, you're not going to get them to do it. It's just not going to happen. And so the fact that you have to take a look at the fact that those worlds are out there aren't going to go the way you want them to just because you want them to. Because if you stop to think about it, you want the world to do one thing, somebody else wants the world to do something else, somebody else wants to do the world. And if you keep going around a couple 100 million times, they're not necessarily all wanting the same thing, now are they? On a very simple basis, you might want, say, tomorrow to have it rain, and somebody else may want sun. So, what are you going to get? So everybody's going to want something different. You can't control what's going to happen. You can't control those things out there. All you can do is control how you react. And that's where your power comes in. That's where your mindset comes in. Because if you start to recognize the fact that you have some level of control, as I was saying earlier about the tires, I don't necessarily have control over the wear, but I have control over what I do and how I drive. So that if I do a lot of running into curbs or speeding and slamming on brakes and things like that, that's going to have some impact on the tires. So that how I react to what I do has more of an impact on how things impact me than whether or not those things are just completely got some idea that they're going to ruin my day. And it's just not going to happen. Does this make sense? Because nothing can control you. You're the only one who can control you. Not unless you've got, strings tied to your hands and you're a little marionette because somebody's pulling your strings. Do you really want to be at the control of somebody else? Probably not. Now, for that to happen, somebody would either have to have you totally drugged so that you can't do anything because they're doing something, which would be a really interesting thing, and you probably know about it, or you'd be tied up and they'd, be manipulating your hands and feet and every sort of things like that. But you control you. You like being able to control you. You probably say you don't want somebody to control you. Now, you might say you'd like somebody to decide where you're going to go to dinner, or maybe they're going to fix something so that you don't have to worry about it. Yeah, you might want somebody else to make a decision. But do you want somebody else to control you? Probably not. So if you think about it this way, when you say you want them or something else to change so that your life is better, you're essentially trying to give that thing or that person control over you. And then you become beholden to what they decide. So if you're thinking in terms that your life would be better if your boss did whatever, then your life basically becomes beholden to what your boss decides to, he or she is going to do. And if they don't like you for that particular day, or if they're having a bad day, and you just happen to be the person that walks by, then your life gets dictated by them. And I really don't think that any of you want to do that. You want to consider the fact that you are your own person and you live your own life. And if that's where you want to be, then you need to consider the fact that you have to react to the things or think about how you react to whatever happens to you. If you don't like it, what can you do about it? Can you reframe yourself? You may not like, maybe, as I said earlier, something like you may want it to rain or may want the sun to come out. So maybe for some reason you wanted it to rain today, maybe because you didn't want to turn the sprinklers on because your lawn needs grass. Lawn needs grass? Your lawn needs water. So, okay, so it didn't rain. So what can you do about it? You can sit there and sort of mope and complain and wish it would rain. What can you do instead? So when you start thinking in terms of how you're going to react to those situations that happen to you, then you become more in control and you dictate your particular life. Nobody else can anyway. Nobody can. If you really stop to think about it, nobody dictates what happened to you. You're the only one who can. And to take control over that means you have to react to whatever life does to you. Because it's going to happen regardless of what you do anyway. So you might as well make some choices that are going to be those choices that you want to modify to make the best for you. So if you wanted sun and it rains, okay, then what are you going to do about it? If you wanted your children to clean up their room and they ignored you, okay, so yeah, you could go in and yell and scream and holler, but that's probably not going to last long. And it's probably going to make things go downhill really, really quickly because they're going to get upset and you're going to yell and scream and they're maybe get to clean your room once, but then they're going to have to do it again. Can you do something else to facilitate that particular interaction so you don't have to yell and scream all the time? And yes, you can do other things. Nagging doesn't work, folks. If you haven't figured that out, people say, I nag all the time, and they don't. Well, does that sort of like give you the idea that nagging might not work? Because if you're having to do it all the time, then why, it's not working, is it? Why not try something else? Life happens to you. Things happen to you. How do you take a look at that thing, and how do you perceive it, and what do you interpret it, and how do you respond to it? And there is where your big difference comes. When you start looking at the fact that I can't do this, or I can't control this, or I don't have the power, or whatever, you're becoming a victim. And is that what you want to do? Now, there are going to be circumstances that you can't do much about. I agree with that. But you still have choices on how you're going to react. Are you going to stay there? If you're in a bad relationship, and you say, gee, I wish this were different, I wish whatever, but you don't change the relationship, what are you changing? You have the option, believe it or not, yes, you do have the option to change and maybe get out of the relationship, and you might need some help to do that. And that's a possibility, but it's still up to you to make that choice to change that, because otherwise it's not going to happen. If you're in a bad relationship and somebody is abusing you, the odds that that abuser is going to suddenly see the light and stop abusing you tomorrow is probably pretty slim to none. Pretty much your only choice is to, either accept it or go off and leave it. Now, you may not like your job. You may not be in a situation that's quite that, to use the term again, abusive. But if you don't like it, what are you going to do about it? Your reaction to what happens to you determines what happens. Because if you don't like this, you yell and scream, you're creating a bad situation, you end up yelling and screaming, and everything sort of like goes downhill from there, right? So then you say, it was a lousy day, but could you have changed your reaction? Could you have stopped and given yourself a deep breath and come up with a different reaction instead of yelling and screaming instead? Some of you are going to say, no, that's the only way. I would argue that that's not the only way to go things. Check it out with other people, or, contact me and ask, and we can talk about it. Does this make sense? As I said, I don't think a lot of people are going to like it because they don't want to take responsibility for themselves. Bottom line. If you want to be responsible for your own life, you start thinking about how you react to things. Now, if you want to think about that and argue with me, feel free to hit reply and let me know what you think. And we will come up with some kind of a conversation, see what we can come up with. Or you can just say she doesn't know what she's talking about and, unsubscribe. And that's okay too, because you're not going to listen to me, because you're not going to like what I have to say, because you don't want to take responsibility for your own life. Because that's the bottom line. It's not what I have to say. It's your reaction to what I have to say. Okay? So I hope that made sense. Hopefully, maybe, perhaps, could be, or maybe not, hopefully, depending on how you want to interpret this. You've got somebody you can send it to and see what happens. But if you have any comments, let me know what you think. Hit reply and, send me some comments and tell me, what you thought of today's comment. And otherwise, we will see you later, unless you get upset with me and unsubscribe, and I'll never see you again. But we shall see. Okay, you take care, and we'll see you next week. Bye.